I guess, that's one thing kind of you pointed out on Twitter is Scott the advocate, budget wonk, knew everything, great on the mic. That was a great testimony you saw.
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell us about how Scott was as an advocate working for the league, and how he learned everything in the budget and everything like that?
I mean, definitely tireless and passionate. This was also a time where there were fee increases happening every year at UC, and so the fight for access was one that I think Scott was driven, that drove him,
right.
Coming through the community college process, sort of taking his own sort of non-traditional path. He was not only very knowledgeable, but extremely passionate. And that can be a dangerous combination in politics, right? To have that level of knowledge and passion, but that Scott clearly had.
Yeah, and he definitely had a little flair too. I remember one of our first big events was in community college. We had this funeral for education. And I still have one of these little funeral placards. And we had a funeral gravestone for every class that had been canceled that year because of budget cuts.
Right.
And it filled up the quad. And, Scott and I were on TV and it was this whole thing. And he was constantly focused on these things about, access to the community colleges, whether it was fees or, just programs and services for people who are kind of the underrepresented in the community college system. And he was really progressive, or really passionate about a lot of progressive causes, and took that kind of student lens to his work, even when he was representing the chancellors or the superintendents and the trustees at the Community College League. He was very much like working for the administration, but with a student lens.
Mm-hmm. And
some of his, testimony in the Capitol, like that snippet that Lance Lewis found, was, him being really passionate. And And like Scott said, there sometimes is kind of this gulf between those who are the most activist and passionate and those who knew like the actual legal stuff. It would be like you'd have the rabble-rousing activist, and then you'd have like Rick Simpson, who would be the only person who actually knew what the actual law said.
Right.
And Scott blended those two things. And then one of the most amazing things about Scott was I became a policy expert in higher education policy. So I was the chief consultant to the Assembly Higher Education Committee. I knew a lot of this stuff, but I basically built up walls. I was like, well, I know higher ed, but don't even bring me a K-12 bill. I don't want to read a K-12 bill.
Right.
That's too much. I'm not going to read that. And then I ended up getting a job working in K-12. So I became kind of an expert in some K-12 policy, but I was like, well, just don't show me a water policy. I don't want to pay attention to that.
Right.
But Scott was the opposite. Like he knew so many crazy different policy areas and just soaked it all up. I haven't even told you this, but I went by his house with the family as we're going through some stuff. And there was this, like just a notebook. And it was notes of him being on the phone probably with people. And it was bill numbers and issues. And it was just like, it was insane, like the stuff that the way he was so connected to so many different policy areas, talking to so many different, almost like a reporter's instinct with that, like just absorbing this, and his ability to absorb and transfer that information to people. I talked to a friend, Evan McLaughlin, who also works for us in the redistricting stuff, and he said that when he was chief of staff to Lorena Gonzalez, he would be in like a 45-minute meeting with somebody about a policy. And at the end, he'd be like, I could have just read this all in the Nooner. Like, what did I